This is tape number 2, side 1.
This paragraph here.
And we're referring again to file 165, a letter from
I assume it's Levy.
Levy Becker to Dr. Sroll.
Ruth and Leo would be, This paragraph here, for some obscure reason, is indicative of the differences of approach between the bureaucracy or the organization and my own. They find fault with me for taking an interest in the Munich Writers' Union and giving them a kind of encouragement for their work. In fact, all the educational programs were promoted by myself. In other words, the newspaper came into existence, books were printed, the Haggadah was printed, the first Haggadah.
You don't have a copy?
No, I looked for it. I don't even have a copy for myself. The historical series were published under my instruction. The American Joint wasn't interested in these things.
They were later.
Well, later was, I'm talking only the period that I was there.
Right.
By the time they got interested, all these things had been accomplished. Yeah.
Now let's just identify it for the, let's see, it's World Jewish Congress file 74, drawer 272. It's to Dr. Kalman Stein, American Jewish Congress. Yeah.
The interesting paragraph in this letter is the one referring to the conference. That conference, I'm pretty sure, is the one that was held at St. Etienne. And it was actually the work of the Palestine Brigade in the sense that it was at the suggestion of Chotter Yishai of the Palestine Brigade that I had called that meeting at St. Etienne. And in all probability, the Congress was interested in getting some credit for various of the things that were happening, and perhaps in their literature or so, because of their people around, everybody was trying to get a part of the action, so to speak. That's my impression here, and I was just correcting a situation. Just let me. Letter to Dr. Grinberg from Dr. Kalman Stein, Secretary of Relief and Rehabilitation Department. I don't know what organization that represents.
That's, I think, the World Jewish Congress.
Yeah, there are a number of items here. The camps should be abolished, for example.
This is a letter that you wrote to them, is that right?
No, this is a letter that from Stein to Dr. Grinberg.
Oh, I see.
In which he says, seems to us that the problem of employment is of extreme importance and should be to a great degree change the material and also the psychological situation and so forth. Also that the camp should be abolished. This, of course, is a letter written by a man that at that time didn't understand the situation. First of all, you couldn't employ the people. The Germans weren't employed either. You hadn't reestablished the economy of Germany. To employ them would mean to set up some kind of a economy which would serve some purpose. We discussed that with Joint. There were many discussions about it, and we tried to set up little factories around the camps and so forth. And this was an ongoing matter for discussion, but actually, it was a very difficult thing because the opportunities were not there. You could set up factories, you needed machinery. In Feldefink, we undertook a big program, got machines, sewing machines and so forth, but you simply cannot take people and make seamstresses out of them simply because you want to put them to work. The UNRWA, at one point, was interested in getting the people to work on such things as roads and so forth. And of course the people rebelled, saying, why should we fix German roads? And it was difficult for UNRWA to understand this.
Seems incredible.
I had to argue with some of the leaders. They would say to me, but this is American tax money that we're using, and these roads are for our purpose and so forth. But they were not sensitive to the psychological factors. So this business about the ending of the camps, which was a big problem that we had to consider and giving people an opportunity to work. It was more talk than anything else. Here he sends me a copy of the letter, a letter with a covering letter telling me that they're interested in these items.
Let's just identify this again. This is file 74, World Jewish Congress, drawer 272, October 31st, 1945.
Letter to Grossman. You know who Grossman is?
Meyer Grossman?
Meyer Grossman.
Or Kurt Grossman?
No, this was Meyer, the revisionist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure.
Because Kurt Grossman, who was this? Well, I can figure it out.
Yes. Well, anyway, I'm under that impression. But this more or less tells you about the package program. It's just a statement on that APO with Rabbi Wall, or Chaplain Wall, that just confirms that.
I think that's an answer to this next one over here.
Dr. Stein, yes, is the response to his suggestion about working. As far as the business of setting up farm schools, this is something that we had talked about and tried. We had one such farm up in Nuremberg, the Neely, I think it was called. But that was the only one.
Mm-hmm.
This was the Streicher farm.
Oh, that's Ann Borden.
Yes, and but beyond that, we weren't successful in this area. I think mostly because we didn't push it far enough, and there weren't others that felt as I did about it, and so it never became part of a program.
Now this was World Jewish Congress, file 74, drawer 272, December 28th, 1945. Was it to Dr. Stein? Yes.
Okay. I think the fifth story finally, I'm trying to recall, resulted in the establishment of one of our units. But I'd be difficult for me to recollect the details. April 8th. Unless that's the time that we got the Neely.
Now here's something. I think this is the thing that triggered my question about your involvement with Stuttgart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember a little bit more clearly of the one killed. And, in all probability, I was there since I sent this wire. But again, that's something that's going to have to leave it because.
Well, my question is, why did you send these telegrams to the American Jewish Congress?
I can't answer that either, except that I responded to letters to me.
Yeah, but this is
a.
But you mean you think somebody wrote to you and asked you about what's happening in Stuttgart?
Something of that sort.
Because everything seems to be.
Had you asked me last week whether I sent any wires to the American Jewish Congress,
you would have told me.
I'd say never.
You see, here's another one.
And here you show me all these wires that I sent. Mm-hmm. But here they are.
Yeah.
It only proves that a man has the ability to forget.
Okay. Let's get down to something a little more substantial, and that's the question of Bernstein and the articles that you sent me, the material that you sent me.
Now, what would you like to know about all this?
Well, to discuss that period of time when you left and then you wanted to come back and what you feel these indicate about your efforts?
Well, I left.
You left on your own volition.
No, I didn't leave on my own volition.
So how did that come about?
I left because the Army had finally decided that I was a source of irritation of some sort to them, and they had finally got me into a position where they could deal with me.
And why was that? Or how was that?
As long as I wasn't attached to a unit, I was able to move about. But when I finally landed and was attached to a unit, they were able to deal with me. And I was eventually assigned to Berlin, and then from Berlin came back to Munich, attached to the 98th General Hospital.
Excuse me, they didn't bother you about the fact that all of a sudden you reappeared again?
No, it didn't bother me at all. It was as if, let's forget that chapter. And they finally pinned me down, and I was assigned to Berlin, and then realizing that was a ridiculous assignment, and I effected a change through the chaplain's office, not through the General Military Command. I'm sure they wouldn't have been pleased to have me back, but the chaplain's office was very cooperative. And I went back to Munich, as attached to the 98th General Hospital, and so there was a commanding officer, and people could get to me through the commanding officer. And my record at the 98th General wasn't too good, and there was a lot of pressure now from various departments to get me out of the area. Mm-hmm. And eventually the Army said to me, in effect, that if you want to stay, you can stay, but you have to join the regular Army.
Which you said?
Well, I wasn't really interested in joining the regular Army. First of all, it wouldn't serve my purpose. If I joined, then I would have to follow certain procedures, and it would take me away from the work. Otherwise, I would have to leave, and so I had no choice in the matter but to leave. This was the kind of pressure they brought. I mean, I left. And there were a few other incidents that occurred between the time I was to leave and the time that I left, actually. But when I got back to the United States,
You don't think that there was you didn't try to have the chaplain's office intervene?
No, because at this point I couldn't see a position that the chaplain's office could take with reference to my being there. Furthermore, the chaplain that was now my superior in the area, a fellow named Tall Ed, he was he was determined to get me out. He didn't want me around, and I wasn't going to start now fighting with Tall Ed.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I got back to the United States, and by this time the concept of a DP chaplain had been introduced.
Mm-hmm.
And this was affected by one of the agencies. Which one, you may have some material on it, whether it was affected by one of the advisors, Bernstein or somebody else, or some agency here in the United States. But there had developed this concept, which I had nothing to do with. And I felt that if you want a DP chaplain, no one was running for the job, actually, that I would go back as a DP chaplain. And so I began to make certain moves to get back.
You had to do this in other words, you couldn't get a pulpit now.
Oh, I could get a pulpit if I wanted it,
yeah,
yes.
I know, but in other words, you had to give up the idea of going back to a pulpit.
That's right. I had no interest in going into a pulpit at this time. So when I came back, I was here in the United States. I was still active in terms of other things in connection with the DP representations that came here. But actually, I wanted to go back. And so I made every effort. I went down to see General Hildring, who was then Assistant Secretary of State, and discussed it with him. And he said to me, sure, as far as I'm concerned, you can go back. And he says, but the procedure is that we have to receive a request from the other side. In other words, we just can't send you. And obviously nobody was going to request me. So then Bernstein was back in the United States for some reason. I met with him in Washington. And I discussed it with him, and the conversation went something like this, which I found interesting. He said to me, when I indicated to him that I wanted to go back, he said to me in question form, he says, tell me why. Well, once he had raised that question, I knew immediately that he wasn't interested in my going back. In fact, he was determined that I would not come back.
Why do you think that?
Well, I think for the same reason that Rifkin took the position he did. After all, I was taking positions, writing reports, and it was incongruous. Look at it this way: here is Germany, here are the DPs, here are the institutions, and here's the advisor. Supposedly, he speaks for the scene. He communicates to the institutions. But if you look through all this material, every time you start a discussion on the highest level, somehow Klausner pops in. What did Klausner say? Is he right? Is he wrong? And so forth. And there's always an argument whether Klausner is right or wrong.
That's right.
Now, so assuming that you're in this role, you're the advisor, and you think of yourself having, you have a rank, I think, of 3 stars. I don't know what it was. It was either 2 or 3 star general. You have this rank.
They were general?
Well, you have to have an assimilated rank, yes.
Oh.
I mean, this was the way you're put on staff. So now you're a ranking member of the service.
Were they called general?
No, but it was important for pay, drawing of supplies, where you live. These are important things when you're in the Army. How much help you have in the kitchen, all those things. You lived well. How many people you have on your staff, what you can draw. So here you take, whether it's Rifkin or Bernstein or any one of them, or Haber, you feel that you're in charge here, that you're the man that's going to represent the total picture to the general, and also the total picture to the American Jewish community. And damn it, every time you turn around the corner, you got to contend with this guy, Klausner. Now, the best thing is to get him out. After all, they had a staff. Bernstein had took Rabbi Friedman and put him on a staff. And that's because they were both attended the same, they were both Jewish Institute of Religion men. They knew each other. In other words, everybody.
But you didn't go, I thought you were also from
Hebrew Union College. These were 2 different schools at the beginning. Rifkin came in and he brought, what's his name on his staff? Rachman, you see. They knew each other. This was each one structured his own staff as any general would. No one ever asked me to be on a staff, an advisor's staff. Logically, the best man to have on the staff would have been myself. I was the most experienced, and I was deep in this whole thing. So they structured their staffs, and there were big enough men to realize that you don't push him out, you don't push me out. And it wouldn't be a wise thing to do. But when the time came that he's out, fine. Now he did his job, and we can run the show without him. We don't need him. We don't need his opinions or judgments or things of that sort. Well, we have staff. They're all well-intentioned people. After all, I'm sure Bernstein and Rifkin and Leventhal and Haber, in their own hearts, feel that they are fully committed to the welfare of the Jewish people, and especially to these people, as I was. So in that we're all equal. But I would assume that if I were in their position, I'd like to get rid of that fella too. So once I was out, and we're colleagues and we're friends, so you have to say, on the one hand, sure, Abe, whatever you want, I'll do the best I can. But when you're not in the position to say that, so you're not going to say, I'm not going to do it. So you simply raise the question, what are you going to do there? And he was surprised when I came back.
Was the Central Committee, I remember looking through the JDC material, and I saw that the Central Committee was very upset about it.
Oh, certainly they were upset.
And they kept writing letters.
Yes, because they realized, you see, that their power was through me. And once I was out of the picture, then the organizational structures could take over.
Is that when the whole question of legalization?
That's right.
And that was a result of the fact that they realized that they were impotent.
No, but no. We wanted recognition right
Anyway.
along. Anyway, this was a normal procedure.
But this was a, but they also had some working agreement with the JDC.
There were always agreements, written and argued. In
yeah.
fact, the meetings of the Central Committee were always meetings of contention with JDC. Oh, they went on and on and on and on, because JDC didn't really care to enter into any agreements with the committee. They preferred that the functions be handled through their departments. In other words, they had a whole staff on distribution of materials. They had warehouses and so forth. They didn't trust these people to handle distribution.
In fact, there was a letter that I have here from Greenberg to Warburg.
Yes.
Complaining about the level of people and the way, the patronizing attitude of the JDC towards
Yes,
them,
well.
and saying that we are on a much higher level than those people who are trying to come over here to assist us.
They were, basically. In other words, if you trace their history against, after all, you take Gringaus was a successful lawyer, and Greenberg was a successful doctor. You're talking about people that in their time and their place had status and success. Now they have to put up with warehouse men. And the warehouse men of JDC were not doctors and lawyers. There was the High Wachtel, who was a good guy, but a tough, rugged guy, and he was going to fight it through. And people of that sort. Beishain, another person, these were, in their way, good workers, but they had to contend with Greenbergs and Gringaus and Traeger and people of that sort. So these agreements that the joint drew up were forced agreements, and each director became another negotiator, and eventually they had to give in and agree to certain things if they wanted any program to work. There were other problems too, in fairness to joint. There were certain things that happened or would happen which were not pleasing. They weren't pleasing to me, and they weren't pleasing to the joint. And the distribution wasn't completely fair under the hands of the people. They had been now accustomed to the whole concentration camp system, where you prefer some to others, and the whole concept of political preference and party preference, which I suffered through, which was very devastating. But you had to make your decision whether you were going to let this evil, or what you called an evil, persist and let the people grow in terms of handling it, or you were going to be not only the assistants in helping the people, but you're also going to be the moralizers. And my feeling was that you were not to be the moralizers. Therefore, when we received the packages, for example, and they were by the thousands, I never so much as indicated where one garment was to go, or how they were to be distributed. And if you were to ask me to give you an account or a report, I'd say I can't do it. Go see Jochelson up in Canada. He'll tell you. And on one case, we had a very bad situation with the Klausner crowd, the Klausner Hasidim, about those garments that came. They claimed that all black outfits belonged to them, and they went to army. And suddenly we had a complete military investigation over these schmattes. It was ludicrous to come to think of it. And as much as I tried to plead with them and say, now, take the schmattes, they fought me. And the reason they fought me is because I was saying, take the schmattes. What they were trying to tell me is, you're not in a position to tell us to take the schmattes. They are ours. In other words, they kept saying, the people in the United States who sent these clothes did not send them to you. They sent them to us. And therefore, they are ours. We will determine, and so forth, which was their way of looking at it. They recognized that I was, let's say, the system through which they were sent, but they were not mine. So from a philosophic point of view, they were absolutely correct. And eventually, we, as far as I was concerned, I didn't care. They could have all the packages as long as the material was going someplace and people were making use of it. Furthermore, I also learned not to care if they took the material and sold it or exchanged it for something, because I learned very early that this was important, because they had to get what they wanted. A woman needed a brassiere. I had no brassieres to give them. And if I gave them a coat, and they exchanged the coat for a brassiere and panties and so forth, or lipstick and things of that sort. The joint, you see, never got involved in this either. They never got involved in the psychological aspect of the individual, the intellectual aspect at the beginning. and in the whole concept of personality. In other words, I'm sure that if you would go to Joint today and say, tell me, did anybody ever think of sending lipstick or girdles? Or did they, after all, you have women here sitting in the office. Anybody ever think of sending a brassiere? Now, how do you expect these women to live? Without brassieres? If you did, then you say, the hell with them. Who are they? After all, they should be satisfied that they can eat and so forth. But they had dignity, too, and they want to look like women and so forth. So, if you gave them something and they used it as an exchange commodity rather than a use commodity, fine. I learned this right at the beginning. First couple of weeks, it was one of my lessons. But at least I learned. The bureaucracy in New York didn't learn much. For practically the whole experience, they were still operating in terms of sociological principles that exist within a community, let's say in New York or some other place. They had never really come to terms with the reality of the situation, which was completely new, of course, to the world.
Now, when you came back, you were in the Castle area.
Yes.
I read someplace, or I heard someplace, that this was an effort to keep you, perhaps we'll see it in some of the later documents.
I was exiled.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. And in a document, somebody mentions I was exiled and then says, nevertheless, he did a good job.
Yeah, yeah. Right. That's right.
Yeah, well, that's true. I was exiled. This was the
work of who?
This was the Joint. You see, when I came back, the Joint, through Leo Schwartz, and that's when that report was written.
Oh, that's the Victory is Yours report? Is that what it is?
That, I think, is the...
No.
Whether that was written at that time or
maybe it's Haber's report. Somebody's report here, I know, mentions that.
Yes. Well, there's... again, this we couldn't establish. But when I got back, that was an interesting bit. Finally, how did I get back, actually, is an interesting story. Okay. We have documents on that. Here's the document which answers the question of how I got back. It's one simple document, which...
Let's read it into the record if we can.
Let's see if I can find it here. Here is a wire that was sent to Judge Fred B. Crame. Now, I don't know Judge Crame, and it's sent by Robert A. Taft, United States Senator. And it reads, referring your letter relative passport for Rabbi Abraham Klausner and immediately taking up matter with department will reply to you as soon as report received. It was a result of Robert A. Taft, Senator, as a result of a letter from Judge Crane. Now, the reason that Judge Crane got in touch with Taft was because of a friend of mine who had heard that I wanted to get back.
Who is that friend?
A fellow named, he's dead now, but I'll tell you the name. In fact, the chapel in the, at the school, the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem, is named after him.
The chapel at the Hebrew Union College?
Yeah, yes. Millstone or Millstone, I'll think of the name. Okay. And the reason that I know him is when I was a student rabbi, I went to this community, which is near Cincinnati, and the judge is from that community, a friend of his. And when accidentally we met in New York and I told him what my problem was, he said, let me take care of it. And so that started a chain of incidents from this fella to the judge to the senator. And without clearing with anybody, I was ordered back to Germany. When I...
Did anybody wonder how you got back?
Oh, yes. Not only did they wonder how I got back, they wondered where I was going. Because I wasn't assigned to any unit, you see, and all I was ordered back. And I got instructions. I went down. Oh, and I got a priority, too, because I went down to Washington. They put me on a priority plane. And it became a very interesting trip because we were fogged in on one of the islands, and then I got to Paris, and there was a debate. Everybody wanted to stop in Paris and so forth. And finally, I ended up in Frankfurt. and everybody was surprised. Bernstein was in London at the time, and one of his staff people, Abe Hyman, was in Frankfurt, and Abe was a little bit shocked. I remind him every once in a while because one of the girls that I knew, she's a doctor in Chicago now, she was with the American Joint, but she represented the Council of Jewish Women. They also had assigned people. A very fine young lady, and we were very good friends. In fact, she waited for me. She knew I was coming back. She waited for me in Paris, except that I didn't get the word, so I didn't stop in Paris, so I went directly to Frankfurt. When she left Frankfurt, she went into Abe Hyman and said, when Klausner comes back, here, give him his typewriter. So Abe Hyman said, Klausner is not coming back. And he says, I'll tell you, I just don't want to take the typewriter. I know he's not coming back. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a camera in exchange. And this became a business because I got my typewriter back when I came, and he wanted his camera back. But anyway, anyway, I showed up. I was there.
But you must have had a good relationship with Hyman.
Oh, yes. I had a good relationship.
He wasn't trying to keep you
out. Oh, no. I had a good relationship.
But he knew that Bernstein was.
He knew that I was gone, and he knew what the structure was, that nobody would request my return or prove my return. The Army certain wouldn't do it, and they're not going to do it, although they kind of indicated that they might, but they weren't going to do it. And the whole staff figured, fine.
But he couldn't do anything about getting you back.
They didn't care to. But now I was back, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. Well,
he didn't want you back either.
No, I don't think he played a part in this at all. First of all, he was in the legal section, Abe Hyman. He wasn't involved in this kind of business, and
that's why I would be very surprised.
Yeah, no, and actually, when it comes down to it, there were never any points of friction between the advisor's office and myself. Mm-hmm. We didn't have occasion to, let's say, Rifkin or Bernstein may not have liked one of the reports I sent to somebody, and he would have to either defend it or say, well, Klausner's overreacting or something of that sort, some of this stuff that goes out, and there were all kinds of discussions about these things. But we never had any points of friction. We never came in contact with each other that much. And whenever I was with them, they treated me very nicely, very graciously, in fact. So I'm back now, and now the question is, what do you do? And so everybody said, wait until Bernstein gets back, because Bernstein was in London. Well, waiting was not my bit. I never cared to wait for anybody. And so I decided I was going south. And the first thing I did, I went down to Heidelberg. It was headquarters. And by the time I got down to Heidelberg, Schwartz, Leo, had already sent up a fellow by the name of Fader.
Yeah,
Fader is now in fact, I spoke to Sam Haber the other day and told me he had just been appointed their director in Geneva.
Oh.
Fader he was under somebody else, but he happens to be a very nice guy. And Fader came up to Heidelberg and with instructions to tell Beadle Smith that I was a danger to the program. And Beadle Smith sent for me, and it was an interesting encounter because when I walked into his office, it was a long room, and I opened the door, and I stood there near the door. He looked at me, and he said, no, I can't see you now. I'm waiting for chaplain. So I said, I'm the chaplain. So he just broke out in laughter. He roared. And I walked over, and he just couldn't stop laughing. And by the time he stopped, he says, do you know what they're saying about you? So he had pictured somebody that was, big or something, aggressive looking something. And so, and it just kind of, he had created an image of what I might be, and then saw that who I was, and we had a short conversation and told him. He asked me a few questions, and then Fader came in, and Fader told him what the joint position was on this matter. And Smith said to Fader after a while, "Why don't the two of you go out and talk about it and come back and tell me everything's all right?" So we went out, and I was angry with Fader, and I says, "What the hell are you guys up to? I mean, is this what what kind of nonsense you're running now?" Fader simply said, "Listen, I work for the joint. I have a boss. These are my instructions." That was the end of that. He had no authority to do anything except to complain. And then Smith called us in and said, "Listen, Bernstein is coming back. He has to come down here to Heidelberg. We're going down to the conference in Bad Reichenhall. You have to wait." And I had indicated to Smith that I was going to that conference. So Smith said, "Fine."
Were you still allowed to travel around without orders?
At this point, I wasn't attached again to any unit yet, you see.
Nobody stopped you?
No, nobody stopped me ever. So he said to me, "I tell you what, wait for Bernstein, we'll all go together." And that is, sounded good, going down with two generals, except that after Fader left, I went into Smith and I said, "You don't mind if I meet you down there, do you?" He says, "No, not at all." So I packed up and I went to Munich. So I got back to Munich, and eventually got to Bad Reichenhall, and then of course there was that dramatic moment that when I walked into the hall for the conference, and Schwartz was sitting there in the audience, and I walked up to the presidium, and I was welcomed back, and I spoke and so forth, and I imagine that was a very bad moment because Schwartz was now leaving his term. I think that the joint had indicated that his time had come to an end. And so he left, and I was back. And then came the question of resolving the problem. I think that had I insisted, I could have stayed in Munich, because Schwartz was going anyway, and Passmann was coming in his place.
Yeah, Charles.
Yeah, and I had a little incident with Passmann before I went down to Bad Reichenhall, which more or less suggested to me if another solution were found, perhaps it'd be better for all of us. And when Smith and Bernstein got together and so forth, they decided that it would be best for me to go north up to Kassel. First of all, Kassel really needed somebody. There was nobody up there, and there were thousands of Jews coming into that area in their camps now. And so I went to Kassel and started to work in that particular area.
Now, I've also heard people say that during the first period of time you were able to do what you wanted, but during the second time when you were in Kassel, etc., that the situation had changed so much that you felt restrained.
No, not at all. The situation had changed very, very much, but I wasn't restrained. In fact, in the Kassel area, I had certain things going for me. First of all, I was a DP chaplain, and therefore I was to work with the DPs. It wasn't a question of always looking over my shoulder to see who was coming after me.
Now you were legitimate.
I was legitimate. Secondly, my relationship with the commanding officer was such that he wanted to do whatever he could for me so that he would not have to recognize any other chaplains in the area.
Right.
So I was completely free. My only problem was the DP unit to which I was attached. It had a colonel by the name of Sinsel.
How would you spell that?
S-I-N-S-E-L, regular Army man. And he was basically an ugly human being. Good-looking fella, nice Army image and so forth. Beer drinking, Sunday morning you get up, the big thing is you drink beer. I couldn't see how they could do that all Sunday morning and so forth. Old line Army. And looked upon the DPs as a kind of a disgusting kind of service that a man has to exercise in the Army. Not for a good Army man. And treated them with disdain. And any opportunity he had, he would do things that would antagonize me, twitch a man's beard, things of that sort. It was an ugly kind of thing. Always looking to catch them at something. But I didn't have to submit to the team. And they recognized it. First of all, they knew that I was a kind of a special guy in terms of the commanding officer, which had nothing to do with them. This was because of other situations. And they also recognized that I was defending the Jewish people and the DPs, and if they would try anything, I would make issue of it. And in fact, to the contrary, I would say that my position there was powerful enough to this extent. We were in a military post in the city of Kassel. It was a regular military post with all kinds of brick buildings and so forth, a stable outfit. And about this time, the Army was beginning to move its troops out of the cities, get them out of the view, turn things back over to the Germans and so forth wherever possible. And they decided they were going to turn this installation over to the Germans. And when I heard about it, I went to the Army right there and said, no, you're not going to turn it over to the Germans. How can you do that when some of our people are still in PW cages, old PW cages? They were in PW cages. And I made such an issue out of it that the camp was turned over to me. In other words, when the military moved out of the Kassel military post, I moved the Jews back in from the worst of our camps. So my position there was very good. The problems were different, and the things that I was interested in were different. First of all, food was not a problem anymore. Clothing was not a problem. Housing was, and so I worked with housing. The treatment of the people by the military was still a problem, but it wasn't because of policy, it was because of individuals.
Right, and there were a couple of documents, I think, about that whole question. Maybe not any of you, but...
There may be, I don't know which you're referring to. Anyway, these were problems. And then we ran into other problems. The underground became more important now in moving of people and through the area and so forth. Other problems that came up and trying to get people interested in going to Israel, that is Palestine at the time.
What do you mean interested in?
Illegally, in terms of we were trying to build up movements in terms of the people and so forth. Various ships, the Exodus and so forth. So our problems were altogether different, but it wasn't a question of whether I could be effective there or not. It was just a different.
So you don't feel that you would have rather have been in Munich or something?
No, not that. No, I could. In fact, I could go to Munich anytime I wanted. First of all, by this time they had what they call the night train, special train, one of these very fast trains that came through from Berlin to Munich, and all I had to do was walk down to the station in the evening and get on the train. And I was there shortly after and come back. It was not a big problem. And I rarely went. The only time I went down is when I had to smuggle people down to, that is, special people down to Munich and go on the train with them so that the guards wouldn't keep them off. I remember taking Levi Shalit once or others down on the train to Munich. But I had no problem. I wasn't confined or anything of that sort. And by this time, Passman had come into the office. Passman was, I would say, the best of all the directors in terms of experience and understanding, ability. And by this time, you were dealing with and the supplies were all coming in, the warehouses were there. The Central Committee was politically oriented now, which was a negative factor. And people were more individualistic and began to do the whole business of Hayas became more important, of immigration, which I had nothing to do with. So there wasn't that much need to run down to Munich.
But in your own area, you were very important in terms of...
I was the only person. I ran the area, the camps and so forth, and did whatever I thought.
How many people were we talking about?
Well, we'd have to start counting again, but I would think that we're talking about maybe 20,000, 25,000 people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Was there anything else about that area that you wanted to talk about? I suppose we'll get through. I'd just like to get through some of these last documents.
No, go ahead and I'll take each document.
Okay, here I found something. It was a Bertram. Is that a relative? Or is that you?
No, Bertram is another, Bertram Klausner?
Yeah.
No, that's another chaplain.
He was there during that time?
No, I'll explain that to you. I don't know where the word appears. Landsberg Institute.
And here's another.
Bertram Klausner. That's just a slip. There is another chaplain by the name of Bertram Klausner. He's a graduate of the Hebrew Union College. He happens to be in St. Louis. And every once in a while somebody makes a mistake. Klausner, Bertram, or Abe. There are two Klausners. So that somebody just made that mistake.
But that's you that talked.
Oh, yes. Bertram, he was he was with the Air Corps. He was not with us. And every once in a while I get his letter, he gets mine, and so we have a kind of an exchange. The Landsberg incident, of course, it was a very famous incident, and I don't know what your interest is in the Landsberg incident.
If you were involved with it.
Oh, sure.
Well,
Yeah.
as much as you possibly can tell me.
And this occurred at the time in the city of Landsberg, where we were fighting over the question whether the camp should be locked or not.
Now, when was this?
Whatever your date is, what date do you have on that correspondence?
April 29, 46.
Yeah, about that.
It was in April. Yeah.
Yes. And what really happened here is under one pretense or another, a number of people went out of the camp, and they kind of did a little ransacking in the community. Supposedly they were upset. They claimed that two people were kidnapped and so forth, but there was never any indication that that was so. And
but yet you sent a telegram to that effect.
Yes, but at that time, this was the...
oh, that's what you thought.
That's right. This is what was being said. And they kind of did a little looting and so forth in the community. And since this was at a time when there was a concern about the relationship between the camp and in a city, such as Landsberg, you see, Feldeping was not in a city. Fehrenwald was not in a city, but Landsberg was the camp in the city. And so as a result of this, the MPs were called in. I was there at the time. And they behaved the way MPs normally behave, and they began to do a little pushing and beating and so forth, and arresting. And a number of the camp people were arrested. And for some reason or other, the Army insisted upon trying them in court. And we now had court sessions. And I remember this is the first time that the Bernstein's office became involved in our setup, and Friedman was sent down, Rabbi Friedman, to represent the advisor. I was the interpreter to begin with, but I did a lousy job, and so the court sessions had to stop until we got an official interpreter. And Gringaus was the defense lawyer, and
What was Abe Hyman?
Abe Hyman came in afterwards, as I recall, but basically the case was being fought by Gringaus. And that's when Abe Hyman came into the picture. This thing didn't work out well, and it had to be appealed and so forth. Eventually, the men everybody was just let off, but for some reason the Army was pushing this. And I think the reason that the Army was pushing this, they were fed up with the behavior of DPs, and this was going to be a test case, and they were going to prove a point and so forth. And it became quite a thing, and we used it quite extensively to indicate the nature of the problem that we had even then in April of '46.
How did you use it?
Well, it was publicized. We brought press in and sent all this information, wires and so forth. In other words, we maintained that if the problem of the people in the camps was attended to and solved and so forth, we wouldn't have these incidents.
Did you work with Friedman in this?
No, there was nothing to work with him in this. Friedman came down only as a representative of the advisor's office. There was
Whose
nothing.
operation was it, in other words?
This was our operation. It wasn't theirs. This Landsberg was part of our central committee structure.
Mm-hmm. I just want to make one thing clear. When did you leave Germany?
I would have to check. I don't. We'd have to get the last of the documents or so forth and see exactly when I left.
And when did you come back?
All this would have to be checked out.
Okay, and when did you finish?
I remember when partition was declared by the UN.
So that was in 48.
When the decision for partition was made.
Okay.
I delivered the so-called victory celebration address in Wetzlar. When partition was announced, and stayed shortly thereafter, and I decided to leave. I decided before that.
But that was your decision?
Oh, yes. No problem then. I was, in fact, by this time, in spite of my attachment to a team that I didn't particularly care for, the commanding officers in the whole area, northern area, if they had a problem of any kind or were concerned, they would call me in, and we'd try to work it out.
And you felt at that point there was really little need for you?
That's right. There was no further need for me. I was only dealing now, for the most part, with internal problems. That is, problems Jew against Jew. And it was no longer a question of the whole structure of army and so forth.
Well, when did you feel that was it at that point?
Just right about that time, that this was, my work was done, and there was no purpose in my remaining. All I would be doing is attending to some little item here or there, and with the dramatic announcement of partition, I figured this was a good time, and shortly thereafter I asked to be relieved. And
now, were you aware of what the activities of other chaplains during that period?
I was aware. Let me see. I was aware during the whole course of the time in the activities of very few chaplains, because to my knowledge there were very few chaplains involved. I was aware at the onset of Lippmann, of course Wall, Spiro, of course Friedman with the office of the advisor. And that's about it.
And Nadich?
Nadich is tripped because I traveled with him, his coming and his going. But I wasn't aware of any chaplain, let's say, that was doing a job over a period of time and had a specific structured program.
Well, you were all working separately.
Yes, but I hadn't crossed anybody, and yet I had tremendous areas. In other words, let's take the whole northern area. There was no other chaplain. When I left, a chaplain came in to replace me.
And who was that?
A fellow named Bernstein.
Bernstein?
Burstein or Bernstein?
Oh, Burstein.
Burstein. And he
Samuel
wrote a
Burstein.
book. Later he went to Israel, and he was with the Air Corps, and he wrote Chaplain with Wings or something.
Right.
In fact, I turned everything over to him. I took him to the railroad station. I indoctrinated him. But there was no chaplain.
Were you pleased with what he was doing afterwards?
I left. I didn't. It wasn't.
No, but when you came back, had you
I don't know what he did or anything. He wasn't. At that point, it really, from my point of view, it wasn't really important anymore. In this whole northern area, let us say, in which I am now assigned, there was no other DP chaplain. I ran across no one, and had no conference or communication with anybody. We didn't have a situation there where DP chaplains were ever called together to discuss anything.
In November, oh no, not the DP chaplains, but
That's
in
right.
the beginning you did get together.
Yes, but this was, I got a hold of people that I knew were around and I wanted to help. But there was no such thing as DP chaplains ever getting. I was never called to a conference of DP chaplains or things of that sort. Actually, I feel that we were there just as an excuse, in the sense that those in power felt that
Security?
that it'd be best to have them rather than not have them, since this was asked for. But no one in authority, whether it was the advisor's office or the military would ever think or did think of calling together the DP chaplains and say, what are the problems, what can we do, things of that sort. They tolerated us. That was about it.
But you felt that there was a definite need for your presence.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Now, the reason I ask you that in particular was because there was a report in May, I believe, of '48, William Haber,
Yes.
in which he says that he felt there was a need for chaplains even beyond 1948.
Yes.
However, that the ones that he was dealing with, or the ones he saw, were involved in black marketeering, and therefore he wanted to end it.
The chaplains were?
Yeah. And that's why I ask you, had you heard about any of this type of activity?
First of all, I would be reluctant to accept this. I don't know what it means.
Well, you could speak to Abe Hyman about it.
I'd be glad to. If he knows.
He will not discuss it in great length with me or go into details.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading it at the JDC at the time, and he was right in the room, and I said, "How about this?" And he says, "Yes." Having written the report himself, he knew exactly what he was talking about.
Well, let me put it this way. I've never heard about this, or I don't know who they are. Up to my first departure, there weren't any DP chaplains, so that's out.
No question.
During my second tour of duty, I met no chaplains. I was in the northern area, and I had... it's difficult for me to understand this because when you look at it geographically, we have Bergen-Belsen in the north. Right. That's a separate entity. Now we take the whole northern part of Germany, that is from Frankfurt up, and I have this whole chunk. You come down to Munich, this is already in the hands of the Central Committee, this whole chunk. So now you have isolated little spots around where you may have chaplains, Jewish chaplains. Jewish chaplain has nothing to do with the Munich structure, because there was nobody that came after me to become part of the picture. Nobody had any...
Like there's a Burstein one.
No, he came in Kassel.
Oh, in Kassel?
I mean in Munich.
Oh,
no chaplain that came into the Munich picture.
You
see?
Left and that was it?
That was it. In other words, I happened to have been a chaplain, but there was no room for another chaplain to come in. The joint took over. The committee was not interested in putting a chaplain on its staff or anything of that sort. In other words, so this whole chunk down here has no chaplain. No DP chaplain became part of the Munich picture. I am in the north, controlling the northern picture. Bergen-Belsen is a thing unto itself in the British zone. Right. So what are we talking about?
I'd like to know.
I mean, what are we talking about? Block it out. And so now, what have you got? You got one chaplain, even when you have DP chaplains, that has still playing a major role. That has maybe 20 or 25,000 people under him.
Who's that?
Me.
Yeah.
And you have nobody in the big area.
What about in Austria?
Well, in Austria, you always had a chaplain. One chaplain was killed there, unfortunately, a nice guy. So you always had a chaplain down there, whether he was in...
but there were 10 DP chaplains.
Yes, but the point is where they were on the periphery of the picture.
Yeah, well, I don't... Oh, I see what you're saying. So it doesn't make sense.
I mean, it does make sense. What do you mean they were doing what kind of black market? They weren't in Munich, and they weren't in the northern area, and they weren't in Bergen-Belsen, where you got the bulk of your people. So where could they have been? You had one in Austria, and you may have had one in Regensburg, and you could have had one around the Bamberg area, maybe, where maybe one followed the other. They weren't 10 at one time. And just who they were and what they were doing, I don't know, except they were not ever in the central thrust of the problem.
Well, I spoke to Haber the other day, and he told me again that was correct. And I hope I'll see him in Jerusalem.
Yes.
And hope to but Hyman would not.
I can ask Abe about it.
Yeah, I think he might be interested. He might tell you more about it.
If they found some chaplain that was interested in black market here or there and made a case out of it, I don't know.
No, I don't think it was made a case.
But the whole question, again, you see, the subject of the black market itself is very interesting. Somebody could write a book on the black market, and it would be a fascinating book, because the black market was not black. The black market was a real market. It was a market that was determined by the laws of supply and demand, as rigid as any capitalistic society is determined by these laws, and especially in a kind of a world in which we live, and with the one exception that the one item that became the measuring rod for the market was the cigarette, which is, to me, a fantastic concept. It is so fantastic that I struggle with it all the time in trying to figure out how this becomes possible. First of all, I don't smoke. I don't smoke cigarettes. And to me, a cigarette is worthless. And yet, what people don't understand is that cigarette became a controlling factor to the extent that it had a value which varied from day to day as, say, the dollar varies today. It wasn't that somebody said, here's a package of cigarettes. Some GI could do it. But we knew exactly what the cigarette was worth. It varied, and it varied by a fraction depending upon supply and demand. And this became the basis for your whole economic structure. And therefore, you have to make a distinction between when you talk about the black market in terms of a market which established itself by virtue of the needs of the people, and let's say black market where a GI goes out and he takes a package of cigarettes and he purchases something for it. I don't know what Hyman or Haber have in mind, but I certainly will discuss it with Abe, and I would say that.
Well, it's a perplexing problem for me because, you see, I come to the end of 1948, and then I see this report, and then that's the end of the chapter.
Let me
just stop.